Same for the city.
Is it okay at the end? Are you now? Okay. So, what is today? Thursday, February 20th, CPA meeting coming to order. Approval of the minutes from November and January. Does anybody have any changes? Did everybody get them?
Yeah, move to accept both sets.
I'll second the motion. Good.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thanks, everybody. So, it's budget time again. Yay. Dan's favorite time of year.
That's right.
For sure.
This is an easy one already.
This is the easy one.
He lives for this.
So, I don't know, Jamie, if you want to review since you
Yeah,
have the chair, not you.
So, I sent out to everyone a proposed budget. This is sort of what the planning department, through talks with the finance department, has preliminary drafted for the committee. Obviously, it needs to be approved by the committee before we can bring it to the city council. Basically, what we're doing is we're estimating about $420,000 in local tax revenue for the CPA for this budget year. We have to set aside the 10% for historic, affordable housing, and open space recreation. So that would be $42,000 in each of those categories. We also need, and the rest would go to the sort of the designated fund and, the reserve, and then a small amount to administration. What I did though is I recommend that we fund almost at 20% each of the set-asides. At 80,000, the account balances are running pretty low in each of those fund categories. The reserves closer to 1.2 million, and we have about less than 100,000 in each of the set-asides. And then I also made the recommendation to then double again the open space and recreation set-aside because we have a lot more projects coming in, and it's almost two categories. We did run into a situation this year because of the extra $25 million that we got from, well, we didn't get it, but the state gave to all of the CPAs. We actually underestimated our 10% set-asides last year because we assumed that we were only getting, $400,000 in revenue, and we actually came in closer to $700,000 in revenue when you count in the fact that they basically gave us a 100% match. It was like a 93% match on the fiscal year 2015 revenue.
The state. Yeah.
And so that basically just changed. So rather than coming in at the 10%, we overestimated the 10% at 51,000, and we're still 20,000 short in each of the set-asides. So the recommendation is to go above and beyond so we don't run into that problem again. So that's sort of my...
Go.
Can I have this on paper? You just said a lot of numbers and a lot of words, and I don't have anything to look at.
I emailed it out to everyone.
I didn't see or print that one. Not that, the budget, the one that gets submitted.
Oh, this is all I have.
You're talking about the budget paper that you're going to submit to the city council for the budget for the CPA for next year. Okay, I would like to see a copy of that form. We did not get that. I didn't get one of those.
This form that I sent out was...
It's this one.
Okay, what on there does it have the administrative cost? So let me see it.
It's the...
All right, this is a spreadsheet. This is not what gets submitted to the city council.
It's, well, I mean...
Mr. Sparkle's right. What this is a spreadsheet of what the planner or the planning office is recommending, and then it goes to the mayor. The mayor puts it in a form that is different to the city council. which has a little more explanation.
We should have a copy of that form that says the line items that it's going to, and that's actually submitted to the city council that we should be voting on. Not just, I'm not going to make a motion or vote on a motion where we say, hey, this much, and this much. That's my first point. That's my first point.
To respond to your first point, that is what the committee did last year. This was the same exact form that I presented to the CPA committee last year.
Because this is a
And
recommendation
then this is a recommendation to the council.
To the mayor.
The city council, recommendation to the committee. The committee
To the mayor.
then goes, that will then go to the mayor, and then it will be changed around.
Okay,
The mayor pretty it up into like a format.
there is a request for budget. Each department has a request for budget that they submit to the mayor. Okay, and on that budget is line by line, not all the expenditures, but the line by line that is requested for the next year, which is personal services, which is each of the accounts, which is revenues balanced against, we go to a reserve account. Okay, that's what we need to see before we vote, before I'll vote on it. Okay, I want to see the piece of paper that goes to the mayor that says that this is what we're requesting.
This is what will go to the mayor if the committee...
What's this?
The paper that was emailed out to the entire committee.
The spreadsheet
This spreadsheet here.
That's not what he's talking about.
This is not what I'm talking about.
I do know, I don't know how
I'll be right back.
government
All
operates,
right,
but
Dan must have it.
what I signed last year, I think that's what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Which it wasn't a spreadsheet, it was like,
It's a form.
it's like a form.
It's a form.
Right.
But it has the exact same information, right?
Yeah.
Mm,
Yes.
Most of the information
I mean,
is very
it
simple.
actually has less information, and it's...
Okay, this has a lot of information on it that does not go on that request. Okay, the actuals and everything else. This is back up to the request, is what this is.
So what you signed was something that came back from the mayor's office to the committee?
Yeah, it was like the, I think, the approved.
I actually don't know what you ended up signing, but it was after the committee voted and after we gave our departmental budget requests up to the mayor.
Much more of a formality.
Yeah.
I mean, it's substantively the exact same thing. This is the budget preparation. It's got all of the past year's data on it. It's supposed to make this easier for everyone.
Too many numbers.
I'm always overcomplicating.
Okay, so these requests that you have in the right-hand column
The requested,
are the bump ups, not the 10%, because I see you're requesting $160,000 here.
this is just my
For
recommendation.
open space.
I'm not requesting anything.
Okay,
It's just my recommendation to the committee and just as a place to start, for the committee to start to have a discussion.
Okay, all right, that's fine. I totally disagree with you with the way that you think on this. First of all, is that the requirement to set aside 10% to each category is a requirement by law and by charter of this committee, which we must do.
The minimum.
Okay, I disagree that we should overfund any of these accounts, because any account can use the general fund. If we request appropriations to a specific account and something else comes up later on, we can't use the money that's in that account for a different purpose. If we allow that account, the money to remain in the general fund, okay, then we can specifically use it for any one of the funds. So the idea to reserve money out for either one of those more than is required, I completely disagree with the philosophy. If a request comes up that requires additional, that's greater than the 10% or greater than all of the funds that are in that current account, we can appropriate from the general fund. So there's absolutely no reason whatsoever to over-appropriate any single fund. That's my opinion.
I happen to agree with that just because the amounts that are in those accounts are effectively, we're saying, are restricted for those purposes.
They are, I think,
And if
once
we're
you-
putting more in, I mean, effectively, you never want to pull that back out, even though officially some of that was unrestricted money when it went in. So I think just to avoid the hazard altogether, is the general account what we're calling the reserve on this spreadsheet, is that right?
No. Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
The reserve is there's two sort of general accounts. We have a reserve and an undesignated. The undesignated doesn't show up in here because it's not part of our budget. It's what we're carrying over from previous fiscal years. And so you don't see, that is...
The running total we don't see, I know, I get that, but I just was wondering about the terminology. So essentially,
Yeah.
the reserve is like the general account
Yes.
for this.
And then these are the set-asides for the three.
Yeah.
Jamie,
Just to clarify, last year, the 10% were funded at about 15%. And again, that's because we're dealing with anticipated how much we think the city is going to get in tax revenue versus at the end of the year what we've actually received. And so it's not to have to make a budget at the beginning of the year and then redo the budget at the end of the year to make into account that we've had different receipts than we expected. The committee has every single year funded it at 15%, the 10% set-asides.
No, never, ever.
it was my understanding we've been funding it at 10%.
Mine too, and I've been on this
I mean,
committee
I don't know
a
what that
long
dollar
time.
figure is. I mean-
It may have come out to 15% from the actual number that was actually put in the budget in the beginning, but we never, ever funded over the minimum.
So do we, Jamie, if we underfund, and then the tax receipts are higher, and then the state match comes in, the only consequence for us is that we have to redo the budget. Is that right? Or are there like other financial implications, like the state match wouldn't be as
No,
much?
I mean, so if we spent out the 10% or set it aside, so if there's a combination of, spending and set aside that makes the 10%, we're okay. But to go,
Wait a minute. If we
Sorry, yeah, you
spend,
lost me on that one too.
if we
Because-
spend 10%, we don't need to reserve it? If we spend,
yes, the requirement is to spend or set aside 10%.
So-
But because we don't sit down at the beginning of the fiscal year and say, we're funding this project, this project, this project, this project, and this project, we don't know what projects are coming in. The committee has set aside the 10% because we may not get any applications for housing this year. And we
There's no
can't,
guarantee that we'll spend the 10%.
and there's no guarantee that we spend it.
all right, I don't have a problem with setting aside 10%.
What's the advantage, or I kind of agree with the opinion here. It seems like we have no real advantage to have larger set-asides as opposed to whatever the project, open space, affordable housing, historic preservation. If the project is good, we take it out of general funding and make up the difference. It
What I'm hearing, though,
just
is-
seems it gives us more flexibility.
What I'm hearing from you is, what it does is avoids having an extra
A
step
step.
thrown in and then going back and needing to make an adjustment, which I don't have a problem with adjusting. I mean, at what point in the year do we actually know, though, like, when during the calendar year do we have an idea of what the final number is going to be?
Dan, how many
This
departments?
is the city council one, but there's a second page even that Barbara filed.
Yes, this is exactly what I want to see the vote.
That's the city council budget, but then there's a second,
That's, I don't make that, but.
This is what
That's
we
why I knew I had
have
a
to
copy.
vote on.
and then,
That
That's what I
form.
signed.
and then
That's what
Barbara
we need.
filed even a second page on that, which is, I don't
So
have.
that we can go right down there without all of this eye distraction. Okay, I don't care what
Too
we
many
spent
numbers on the page for you.
2 years ago.
Okay.
That's what I want to see. I'm old, my eyes are bad. At least the font's bigger than that, one size.
Okay, just to clarify, the budgets are due today. We have an extension.
Then they're late.
All right.
I don't know, she's the boss.
That's damn straight.
I think that
So, all right. I feel like that one of the general consensus is that 10% is where people are most comfortable. This side of the table I haven't heard from.
That's correct, I agree.
Okay, so the only other sort of thing that's a thing but non-thing is the increase in admin expenses, and part of that is because the CPA Coalition increased their fees, their dues, their annual dues, like sort of dramatically.
Give me some context here as a newcomer.
Oh, it's not that expensive. It went from 1,200 to 7.
It went from 1,500 to 1,750.
Yeah.
It had stayed at 1,500 for the last couple of years, but because of the fact that the state gave everyone more money, the CPA Coalition raised their membership dues.
Isn't that nice of them?
And if we expect them to do that again this year, we're setting aside $2,000 for the membership dues, the annual public hearing, and there's a few other small administrative expenses that fall into that category.
We could drop out and protest because of the price hike, boycott.
And what's the salary? I don't know anything about this.
That's what we pay, Jamie.
Okay, so the portion goes to your...
Yeah, it's minimal.
It comes out to, I do on average 5 hours a week of work for the CPA committee. So that comes out for the year at $6,000. And if the committee wanted to have some flexibility there for other projects that might come up, the recommendation was to go to 7,000, which would give me an extra hour a week. So it'd be 6 hours a week for the CPA committee.
If need be, and if it's not spent, it's recaptured, right?
And, you know, the one thing that I think is good about that is since we've done that, is what it also does is it takes burden off of the remainder of the city and allows the planning department to have additional staff that they don't. I've seen so many times in the past where things start getting cut back and there's not enough to fund the department, and you lose a guy like this, and then if committees like this can pay their share, I think that they should.
Okay, so can you swallow it not being in the right form so we can pass it tonight?
Yes, I could, as long as we're clear about what we're spending.
Okay, so Jamie, if the...
Can I
Yeah.
take a minute to just, to re-go through the totals? Or do
Well,
want-
if we dropped everything down to 10%,
Right, so
what would the actual
that would be 42,000
each?
in each of the 3 set-asides.
Okay.
And I just have to figure out what that,
So the one other thing up for discussion, and I actually agree with Jamie, I do agree with Jamie on this, that doubling the open space, because it is essentially now open space and recreation. So putting,
I was just using it as an example.
no?
It shows,
You think we could just pull out of
it shows
it?
favoritism if a project comes on that's open space, funded out of the general fund.
Right. What do other folks think?
I have to agree.
I'm okay with that.
That leaving all, 10% down the board,
It gives us
anything else we can
control.
pull
It
out of
gives
general
us,
fund?
options.
I think we're
Okay.
needlessly restricting if we do it
Okay.
otherwise.
Now the reserve goes up by whatever you took.
Yeah. I
Should've brought your calculator.
I have one on my phone if I really want to think of it. Jamie has a computer. Do you give to the accountant?
You're being,
I'm a CPA.
So it would be 42,000 a piece instead of 80,000 a piece for the 10% set aside for a total of 126. Right?
Yeah, 126 would then subtract whatever 126 from
and so then that should
master
be
amount is, right?
294 going to the reserve.
Yep.
That's just slightly less. 285.
285.
Carry 2.
So at some point, are we saying that 10% figure requires like a true up? So is that what?
If this committee spends the amount, so we set aside 42,000 in each account this year, and then we also fund a couple of projects from the undesignated account that are historic preservation or whatever those categories are, those get credited to it. But the money has to be spent in that fiscal year
So this get credited to what?
to that set aside.
Oh, yeah, you pull from the set aside first before you pull from the general. Is that what you're saying?
Right, but then when the set aside is zeroed out and we're pulling from the undesignated account for historic preservation, that would, at the end of the year, we would look at how much in total we spend for historic preservation, not just what we pulled out of the set aside.
Right.
But the number you have today may not be the number we have by the end of the year for the total amount to
Right, I mean, so typically, the advice that I was given by the finance director was, we take last year's tax receipts, we do a very conservative increase on what we received in taxes from the previous year, and then we overestimate the 10%. So that way, if we do actually get more than when we get more than we anticipate in tax revenue, we've already accounted for it.
So you're not having to do a
So the way that played out last year, this committee expected to receive $325,000 in tax revenue.
And we got 371.
We received $371, but we had set aside $51.
This is my question from earlier. At what point did we know that we had 371?
Not until November.
Once the fiscal year.
And this 371 is still, because the fiscal year hasn't closed, we may not collect all that money. There are delinquent taxpayers there are people who we've written off as bad debt, and then they come and they pay their taxes, years late. So that number won't be set until the fiscal year closes in July, and then it takes a month or two for the accounting to.
Well, so, I deal with this in taxes all the time, so you have, if you guys do your 1040s or whatever, you get a deduction for state taxes on your federal return. But if you get a refund from the state, they're gonna send you a 1099 for that, and the next year, you gotta, count that as income on your 1040. So can't we, at some point, we have to true up based on our actual receipts from this, CPA tax, right? Can't we just do that in the following fiscal year?
It's somewhat, it actually happens when they reconcile the budgets. And that's when they do the, what do they do?
The recap isn't till, it doesn't get approved till like October, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does
That's when you free
happen.
up free cash. Everything stops July 1, and then
Right.
we don't get the free cash back until.
Yeah.
They're not gonna come around and shut down the CPA committee.
No. Okay.
9.93% rather than 10%.
First of all, every single year, we have spent more than 10% in each of the accounts, as well as put 10% in the reserves.
Oh, in addition to.
I don't think we have to worry about not spending 10%. For a long time, housing there were no projects, okay? So there were years that we didn't spend it, so it only accrued to 10% till we made the $200,000 bonus or whatever it is and we requested projects. So I don't think we have to worry about not spending the money.
In any given year, we might. You're saying there were some years where we didn't have spending for some of these areas.
With housing projects, yeah.
Yeah, and in that case, you just put the 10% aside. I don't think we've ever had to go back and add to any of the accounts in, I don't know, however long
No,
this committee is.
the committee's never had to go back because the projects have been spent out. It's just about being conservative to make sure that we don't run into problems at the end of the year. Also, any money that isn't budgeted, we don't get to use until the following fiscal year.
What?
If the committee estimates, 420,000 revenue, and we actually get 450,000 revenue, that 30,000 doesn't come. We won't know that until the fiscal year closes, and then that goes into the next year's undesignated account.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that.
From a legislative standpoint, aren't we only obligated to do 10% of what we know, not what we project?
It's 10% of what we anticipate receiving in revenue, including the state match.
What's the governor going to give us for the cherry sheet this year? That's what we
Same
start
as last
off.
year, but the legislature's going to give us more, they say.
Then we don't even need to do anything other than estimate and do 10%.
Great.
We don't need to adjust at all.
That's it.
Oh.
Not to worry.
Okay.
That's why this was getting too complicated by not doing 10%.
Okay.
Okay. The other thing that you have when you inflate one of these categories, someone looks at the public record and says, "Hey, there's a pile of money there.
How
Let me
come
go.
they did
Let me go find out what I can spend." So they come.
Okay. Point made. So we're backing everything down to 10%, so 42,000 in each category.
Yep.
So 285 in the reserve?
Yep. And then the 9, the 7 and the 2 for the salary
Yep,
and administrative.
yep.
Sounds good.
Just for a second on the and I'm not, Jamie does a fantastic job. My problem is we're looking at all stipends in the city.
Yeah.
And this one is one that has really crept up. And I guess, I know, and again, I don't want to talk specific, but that's about a quarter of your job, of the hours, is that?
Yeah, I work 21 hours a week. 5 hours is devoted to the CPA.
Okay, and you're gonna continue to do 5, or you're gonna do 6?
I'm continuing to do 5, but if we budget...
So you're saying if there's...
If there's a need for the committee, let's say, last year the preservation plan came up and I spent a lot of extra hours on the preservation plan. As things come up, maybe there's a project that the committee decides they want to do, and then those hours are already there. We don't have to get a supplemental budget request. If it's not used, the committee will get the $1,000 back at the end of the year and it'll roll over to the undesignated fund.
How do you figure your time on, say, like, we'll just use the latest project we approved, like the boardwalk? Now, to me, are you still, like, you're not, quote, and I'll say building, I know that's not you're not building CPA as you go forward, say, like, for the meeting, say, next, isn't there a meeting next week?
I actually am not involved in the...
At the board, okay.
If
it was one you were involved in, I mean, doesn't it stop? I mean, our responsibility to pay the salary is to the point of once we appropriate. Once it goes beyond that, it should fall back on the planner's budget, I mean, I would think. In other words, we don't fund anything 100%. In other words, like the baseball fields or something, or whatever. I'm just using them as they come up. I mean, that... In the planning, I can see where you're involved, and you do a great job. But once it's approved, and it's only a partial, it seems like it would be for the rest out of the salary. Again, I'm not saying it's not a good idea. I just wanted to kind of clarify how it's
I don't really understand what you're asking.
Harold, hold on, let me try.
I know what you're saying.
I know what you're saying too.
I know what you're
So, like with the baseball field. So you do all the prep work in anticipation to the meetings. We have a bunch of meetings. There's prep work involved in every single one. Then we approve it.
Yep.
But then there's still things that are happening not involving CPA with the baseball field. Dan's asking...
Maybe out of the planner's office, I mean.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they still... I mean, so after the...
But then, so he's asking, are you then pulling out of CPA hours to continue to work on
Well, I mean,
baseball
the
fields?
baseball field isn't something that I'm working on. It's not my project.
Well,
so
any projects.
None of these projects are projects that the only involvement that I have in
Pretend
those
it was a project.
the only involvement that I've had on those projects to date has been, bringing the meeting with the applicants, bringing the applicants to the committee, dealing with paperwork, bringing that to city council after it gets approved, dealing with the financial, how people are getting paid, any agreements, questions that come up. And that's all still CPA initiated project. So I don't see that my job ends with that project when it comes to the committee, because...
Not that your job ends. I think Dan's asking if you're pulling out of CPA.
Let's go back to the boardwalk, because I think it's a project. I know you're not involved in it, okay, but we've now approved the boardwalk. Now there's going to be meetings. I know next week there's a meeting. The planning department's having a meeting for the public. I'm not saying you're involved, but say this was one of your projects and you went to that meeting, that would be not billed sort of to the CPA, right? At this point, it's not a CPA project, it's a city project. That's a CPA partially funded. I mean, there's grants involved. It's not a CPA.
I mean,
I guess I know it's maybe...
That's not...
Maybe it's...
If I do go to that meeting, it's as a planning department representative, it's not as a CPA representative. If the committee has their annual meeting and I'm going as the administrative person to the CPA, then that's a CPA expense. If I'm going to represent the planning department, then that's a planning department.
Do you have to track your hours based on,
I do. I track my time, where I spend it.
so you have an idea of how many hours every period or whatever is CPA versus planning and so forth, and you have to keep a written, wow, okay.
You know, I don't want to, I understand your question, but there's a point I think that we may be splitting the hairs. I think as a general consensus as a committee, I think what we need to agree is that the value of having a representative on the planning board, is it worth $7,000 or $6,000 a year for us? And I think it's the time you spend in an office, when you start breaking it down too fine, it gets problematic. If he spends 4 hours actually putting all this stuff together one day, 1 week, and has to balance the account and charges 5 hours for the week, I don't think we need to get that fine on this.
See, Edward, my concern is, as I said, we're taking up this year in the council stipends across the board. In other words, and there's a lot of other people that have a full-time, or in this case a part-time job, that also have a stipend position and haven't had a raise in several years. And I think we're trying to figure out, or at least I'm going to try to figure out in the committee, of exactly how does it work. In other words, from their regular job to those particular committees and the specific work. And that's kind of what I was aiming at with Jamie. Again, I'm not in any way saying that anybody here isn't,
You're doing your job.
Right, and I think he does a fabulous job, as do the other city workers. I'm just trying to look at it from a little bigger, because I know that's coming my way. So
If the rest of the finance subcommittee can't buy it, then they can always have the power to take away from the budget, but can't add.
Right.
Okay. So, we're good with the 10%, we're good with the reserve. There's still some question around 6,000 versus 7,000. As Jamie said, if he's, right now you're only planning on working 5 hours. If there's a project that comes up, there's potential for that extra hour, but there's nothing, it's not like you're suddenly going to start working 6 hours a week.
And there's not 6 hours worth of work right now.
That's what I think too.
There's just not 6 hours worth of work. But if the committee decides that,
if there's a big project,
let's say all of the open space and recreation parcels that the CPA helped with, and then the CPA wants to now put signs on all those parks,
for example.
Who's going to do that?
Right.
Who's going to do the legwork of manual it then? If you say, Jamie, will you take that on? Then we have that hour that I can use my administrative time to make that happen.
Yeah. I'm in favor of it because, as we've discussed, if it doesn't get used, it goes back. So it's not.
It's a no-lose proposition.
Pretty much.
Maybe we could spend the next hour chasing the guy to the clock.
No, we already talked about it.
The clock.
Okay. Ed, are you comfortable?
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right. Folks, are we good? Can we get this done? Okay. So I don't ever make motions, so I'm chairman, I'm gonna make a motion that we're doing 10% set-asides at $42,000 a piece in the 3 categories for a total of 126. And then we have 285,000 in reserve and 9,000 total for admin for the FY15 budget.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Good job.
All right. Budgets, man, oh man.
Tough to be Switzerland.
I know, right? So the other thing, and I don't think this is going to take very long, is the final review of all the documents that Jamie put together. I had a couple of changes, and they were like minor, whatever things. But the one thing that I know Jamie and I both wanted to talk about, and we're sort of on the same opinion, but slightly different opinions, is the requirement for any future CPA awardees to have permanent signs installed on their projects. My only concern around it is that I don't want it to be an undue burden for any grantee, or it to detract from the project. Like if it's an open space project and plunking a sign in the middle of it is going to really make it hideous. Like I don't want to force people to do that. Jamie's argument, and I think it's a really great one, is that we do want to make more people aware of CPA in the community. We want people to be able to see what their tax dollars are going to, given that I get angry letters from people saying, what the hell are you spending my money on? So, signs are great. So Jamie's solution was to just know how much a sign would cost and then incorporate it into the budget that they request from CPA. But I wanted to get other people's thoughts about it, because right now it is in the grant awardee letter and like sort of the what you need to do now that you've been funded. Part of it is a permanent sign. So I don't know if folks have thoughts about it. We've had a couple of projects that have done temporary signs, like when the church painted, they put on their little church thing, like thanks CPA for a little while, and I think that's awesome. And I know like the Windows project, I think they have a permanent sign in there somewhere, and one of the Passaquoddy Land Trust things maybe has a sign.
Is the sign requirement going to be controlled by us, or in other words, like
The size of it,
the size of it, the color of it,
location.
The way that it's proposed,
I mean, I guess
that the applicant knows before they come to the committee that they're required to have a permanent sign, that they figure out what that permanent sign is going to look like, what the text is going to look like, where it's going to go. That's going to be a line item in their request to the CPA committee.
Okay.
If the CPA committee has problems with the wording or the size or the location, then all that happens before the committee votes on it. And then it's all set and it's all done before it goes on to the city council.
not to interrupt you, but we could theoretically, I would assume, exempt them from the sign if we felt
I mean, there's
if we felt like what Alexis was saying is just a big open space, if we don't feel a sign is necessary, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a question of, when an applicant is told at the end of the project, they've already got all their budgets and everything, oh, you need a sign too, and, an extra $1,000 on a sign is, they're not ready for it. They don't have, and not every project is it appropriate to have a sign? If we're doing affordable housing, we don't necessarily want the sign out front that says, this affordable housing project will be made possible by the CPA. Like, you want people to live in their house and be a part of the community and not,
Advertise it that was a
Well, in light of that, though, there's part of me that says, well, why are we making it a requirement if we know that there are these cases that could put, potentially we just are not going to either want a sign or need a sign.
Just so we have a chance to review it.
Is there a way? Is there a middle road here between something less than a requirement that encourages or that allows us to have more visibility? Because what we're really getting at here, I think, is an interest is visibility, right?
Yeah.
So how can we address the interest of visibility? Maybe there's something about actually requiring it and putting it in. You get people who are
So do you want to have it published someplace where people can see what all the projects are that are completed, or?
I'm throwing it out. I don't have the solution. I'm just wondering whether we go all out to.
If we're going to do a requirement and then have a lot of exemptions.
The reason that Jamie wrote it in there is because for a number of years, the committee has talked about it with everybody that comes before the committee, that we walk around town and can't tell, like you went down to the park by the pond, I don't know what they call it, and dumped all kinds of money in there, and no one knew that CPA funded the pavilion down there. Mm-hmm. Everybody's looking at it. In the summer, you got 1,500 people every weekend standing there listening to music on it, and they're sending a letter to the head of the committee, what are you spending my money on?
Well, we send out a mailing to the citizenry of Easthampton then. Here's what, your postcard mailing annually saying this is what the CPA can, your CPA dollars went. If it's a matter of like trying to get information out there, like I'm like, you can put signs out, but if this is about informing the community that this is where your CPA dollars are at work.
I know.
Well, the idea.
Put it on the website or whatever it might be.
It's not permanent.
No, man.
The idea is to put, if the CPA does a project and spends a lot of money on it, then people should be aware of it when they use that project or go buy it. And I wanted bronze plaques on all this stuff.
Told that you mind, and then we forward you. please.
That
maybe
will
you
last a
can
day.
plate it. If I bring you a piece of gold, so after a number of years of very few people putting plaques on, we must have funded over 100 projects by now, and there's, what, 4 signs up?
If that,
So by putting it on the application, if they leave it blank, then we can ask them about it. If we don't like what it is or don't think it's necessary, then it empowers this committee to do something if they put it on the application.
Well, let me just play devil's advocate here for a minute. So, what if we were to do something saying, your big ticket items, your big projects over a certain dollar threshold or size or impact in the community, sure, a sign makes a lot of sense. This is, but we get a lot of, we have a records project here in this building or whatever. Where's the sign going to? At some level, like, can we say there's a requirement for these types of projects and maybe not for all the projects? I'm just throwing some ideas out on the table.
We put a dollar amount on it.
you can also just, we can just say in the letter.
What's the actual wording, Gene?
Just that Easthampton citizens want to know where their CPA funds are being spent. Therefore, the committee requests that you place signs at the project site and make every effort to credit the source of this funding in written materials. A permanent project sign is required. We can then add to it, a permanent project sign is required for all open space, recreation, and historic preservation projects, and will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis for need
So
or
there's
something like
even
that.
his language.
Or put, even if you wanted to put permanent sign will be required at any projects funded over X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
Then that would be a compromise. But I think it's worded well as far as them advertising and putting out the cards and correspondence that it's funded by CPA. But the idea of the permanent sign is make people aware of the project years after.
10 years later.
Sure. The main thing is I'm trying to avoid some maybe unintended consequences of sort of a blanket requirement of these signs.
Well, but if they're all going to be reviewed during the process when the applicant is in front of us.
We're not making law here. We're really just talking about how this CPA
Policy.
committee wants to, what policy the CPA committee wants to make known to the public when people come to the planning department for an application.
I get it.
Run it for a year and see what happens.
I feel like if we're straight dealing with the people who are applying, then we don't say we're asking for the moon and then negotiate down from that. You say, oh, we were just kidding, or we didn't really need that for this project or whatever. I just want to be clear in our communication with the people who are coming forward in good faith with these projects.
You can just say, we can just change it to a permanent sign, maybe.
Well, that's what I was going
Yeah.
to say. Can we just add that first line instead of
Yeah.
a permanent project sign is required? We could put a permanent sign project may be required. The size, content, location should have been determined by the CPA
That's the award letter,
committee
so.
during the process.
Yep.
So I think that would work that way. They know that a sign could be required and that it's going to, during the process, we would determine what sign, if
Yeah.
they need one, what size, and put it, so they know it's something that may come, and if it's a hardship on them, or we don't feel it's appropriate, then we can take it.
So so you're saying when someone comes here asking for money, we will basically tell them, yes, you need to give us one, or no, you don't. With the may would basically mean that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, also, when.
And that way it's up front before they get into
I
it.
also,
It's in our discussion too, rather than as we've always done, in hindsight, the project's completely funded, and then we go back, well, geez, maybe we should have put a sign up for it.
Yeah, you're not springing about
Right, that's work, right.
Yeah.
And I do meet, or try to meet with all of the applicants before they submit anything. So if someone says that they're doing historic preservation on birth certificates, they don't need a project sign. And I think that I can sort of guess that the
Yeah.
committee's gonna go that way. If they're doing, buying new land for open space protection, I'm gonna err on the side that the committee's probably gonna wanna see a sign permanently there. And there might be some gray areas that I don't know how the committee's gonna do it, and I'll say, it could go either way. That's just gonna be something the committee's gonna wanna talk to you about.
Right.
Yeah, so basically, I'm good with that.
Maybe required sounds good too.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe,
So
good?
it should maybe required for all open space, historic, and recreation, but leaving out the housing, because I personally feel that we don't want to
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
require it in housing, that would scare people off.
Yeah. Were there any other, that was the one thing that Jamie and I talked about that we knew we wanted to check in with folks about, but did anybody else have any sort of big comments about all the administrative crap? No?
Good.
Good?
We got technical improvement in that last word.
Just if we get back up on housing, and again, I'm just trying to wrap why again are we like boxing ourselves in? I mean, I could say like a project, say like this mill that they're doing across the street.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think a small sign on that building that would say that, you know, part of this rehab was funded by the Community Preservation Committee is in any way detrimental to the, I'm not saying somebody
No, I agree.
gets a CPA money to rehab their home, you know, that you're gonna have them put a sign out front saying
Yeah.
my roof was
Right.
partially funded, but I mean, I think like a mill rehab like that would be a perfect place.
Well, I think that because these projects benefit specifically low and moderate income people, they're putting a sign on their door that says poor people or lower moderate income.
But we changed it to required to maybe.
You just say maybe required to not get specific.
I can
and
just
then-
say, yeah.
Yeah, and with honestly,
Then
with the,
you trust your opinion.
I don't think anyone's gonna be pushing it for in what you're talking about. I'm just saying that mill would be one that, again, I don't think that would be
And
a sign saying that,
with
you know,
Cottage
more that the
Street-
whole thing was rehabbed is a part of the
You
thing.
wouldn't
Not
know.
saying this affordable housing project was rehabbed by
Right.
CPA funding, but this mill was rehabbed.
yeah, with Cottage Street, you wouldn't know if it was historic preservation necessarily. So just saying that the rehab was funded by CPA is a lot different than like Parsons.
Right,
Yes,
where it's a new
Parsons.
development.
That's different, I agree.
So I think leaving housing in.
In May, we
And
can-
the
So I'll
May,
just say maybe required.
Right,
Yeah.
and then we can
Leave
go.
out the description.
But somebody voiced a concern about it being a possible deterrent for people actually stepping forward with a project.
it was Jamie and I don't think it's,
If we were requiring it on affordable housing projects, if you got, you know, $10,000 to repair your roof.
but we're not requiring it,
And you
so.
have, yeah, so that's,
It'll be fine.
As long as we don't think we're scaring off, you know, projects by just putting a maybe required something for, you know.
It's totally fine.
Because the person's gonna come in and say,
Yeah.
do you think I'd have to leave?
Right, and then Jamie can talk to them and then.
If you wanna give me 10 grand to put a new roof on my house, I'll take it, and I'll put a sign up 4x8 that you can see from 91.
Right on the roof.
That means it's
A billboard.
So, we need to vote on this stuff,
Totally agree.
right, Jamie?
yeah, I mean, you can do it all at once. I mean, I think the discussion,
Yeah.
make those changes, and
Okay.
then, if you guys want to just say they're
Good?
good.
Are we good? Good? Yeah?
I mean, I don't know that there needs to be a formal
I don't
vote as
think
much
there
needs to be.
as
No, I
a
don't think so.
consensus from the
Okay.
committee that that's how it wants to go forward.
So, in the interest of time, Barbara is clearly not here to talk to us more, but we are on our decision for the proposal, and I don't know if anybody had any other questions after our discussion last month with her.
We had a tour, so we saw
Oh, did you see?
the
Cool.
system.
That's very exciting.
Dude, they could put a sign on the booklet, right?
Anything's possible.
A sticker inside each of the ones. So when somebody took the book out and looked at it, and they opened up the cover, it would say restored by CPA funding. A white label in there.
Yeah.
So we can rule on it.
All right, you want a motion?
I do, I'm actually trying to, I am too.
She asked for between 10 and 15.
Oh, right, she said she could do whatever she needed to do with
She would be
it.
happy to take whatever the committee.
She'd be happy to do whatever.
Less or more.
She said 10 or 15, but she'd be happy with it. Eddie.
So what are we gonna give
Here's
it?
the application, you know.
Yeah,
I move that we recommend $15,000 for preservation of records in the town clerk's office.
I'll second the motion.
thank you. All in favor? Thanks, folks, that's easy. Jamie, did you get that?
1 second.
So we got him 30 grand so far.
Oh, no. That's great.
All right.
The open projects discussion, thank you. Jamie?
Yep.
Right, so that one, this spreadsheet, this lovely spreadsheet about what we originally budgeted and then what's remaining. Is this just a FYI?
This was because Harry wanted to have a discussion at the last meeting about the open projects. Also, there was a request by one of the former city council members in November
Right.
for the committee to have more accountability.
Right.
So, in that vein, this is just a list of the projects that the CPA still has
That's great.
open.
That's great.
I mean, the ballpark construction, that just hasn't started yet, that's why that's all there.
Right.
Promenade hasn't started yet, that's why that's all there.
Jamie, could you remind me when the boardwalk is scheduled to start construction? Do you know?
We're at the 25% design. What everyone saw was 25% design.
Right.
The promenade costs include the final, the 50%, 75, and final design,
Yeah.
bidding, all that. So my understanding is that we're going to have public meetings on the project.
I believe the first one's
one's
next
next
Wednesday.
week.
Next
Okay.
Wednesday at 5:30.
And so we're going to get comments from the public.
Yeah.
And then it's billed on a reimbursable basis. So we have the city will pay out and then get reimbursed from the state.
Great. We don't have an estimated construction start date.
This one, we just.
I would say it's probably a year from the spring is my best guess, considering where we're at with the design.
All right.
It could be as early as this fall,
Yeah. Okay.
but just from
Cool. So the boiler.
that's complete. I sent in the last payment. 2
So are
weeks
we
ago.
getting money back?
No.
Okay.
So it's not really remaining.
Right.
$4,000 isn't remaining anymore. Is that
No,
what you're saying?
it's just because it's still showing up in the city ledgers. I don't know why. The payment was sent out.
Okay.
It should be at zero.
So it should be zero. And then the rail trail, that actually is remaining, right?
Yeah.
And we don't have an obligation?
I have to do more research and figure out what's going on with that.
Okay.
There are still some remaining punch list items that have to be taken care of on the trail. Some of that, I believe, was given to the rail trail committee, and I'm not sure how they're using that.
Okay.
So I have to do more research, and I can get back to the committee next
Okay.
month on that.
Cool, thank you. Lower Mill Pond Park, is that the pond you were thinking, or the park you're
Yep.
thinking of?
We could put a sign up for $6,796.
Yeah, do you know?
There was, so there still was some punch list. There was security, and they were painting the pavilion.
Okay.
There's some benches and things. Again, that's, I can talk to John Mason and figure out where he's at in that project as well.
Great. Football field, we know what's going on with that. Clock repair, we're not even talking about. And then Parsons and Cottage, we know what's going on with those guys.
Not to be a consequence, but
What is going on with the clock?
yeah.
Okay.
I don't look at that clock because he started it.
The motor,
So I talked to Fran Root last week.
yeah.
The motor was delivered, it was installed, and then they realized that the hands weren't balanced, and so now they're rebalancing the hands.
Yeah, we got a better like going to Mars.
Okay.
We're putting a landing party on Pluto before
It's only been 5 years.
You got the white church with the 10-year
That, the clock.
At 6:30 all the time.
That's called the town.
It's not working though.
It has,
No,
right.
hasn't worked yet.
It's got lights.
Yeah.
Like 35.
Yes.
It's been painted.
Yeah.
It may not work, Harry, but it looks nice.
It does.
It looks nice, that was the idea, and it was so it looked nice.
8,000.
Well, I don't know what time it is, I can look at my watch. So
Yeah, like
always
the old saying goes, anybody know what time it is? Does anybody really care? I mean, that's what it was. Maybe we just need to allocate some more money.
Yeah, no. We're not allocating it for money. Are there any other questions about this? I think thank you, Jamie, for putting that together. That was helpful. And you'll check in with rail trail people and
Yeah.
figure out what the hell they're doing.
Yep.
What's the latest on that?
Oh, so Tom was supposed to,
Okay, so
Thank you.
The football field, they've done their design, they're finishing up their construction documents. They plan to submit to the committee
March.
For the March meeting, a set of updated construction documents and budgets and all of that. The committee left their hearing, funded them the partial amount that they were requested so they could do the initial design and then come back and ask for the rest. So they should be back in March to ask for the construction funds, and there should be a
There'll be an
full set
updated
of
budget.
plans and budget and everything else that the committee would need to go forward with that request.
Yep.
Or say no.
Right, up to you.
Tell him to go screw. And
Really? Turn into regular potty mouth.
I am normally a potty mouth. I restrain myself normally. And then we have an outstanding application with the Housing Authority. I have no idea what's going on with it. I spoke with the executive director. She just wrote a letter to me asking for money, and I told her that we actually have an application process and kind of ran her through it. And I don't know if she's been in touch with you.
She's not been in touch with me, and I have not received.
It's Jane. Jane,
I don't think it's Jane. There's a new woman.
that's the one.
Is it Jane? Okay. Do you know her?
I met her in the last meeting, yes.
Okay.
We've got another meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if she, they had a project and then she just hasn't finalized.
She's usually there early in the morning before we, she starts at 8, but she's usually at 7 or 7:30. So if I see the light, I'm just going to stop there and ask her what's going on.
That'd be great. Thanks, Ed. Any other outstanding questions from folks, budget related? No? We good? That's all we had. Our next meeting is March 20th. Adjourned. Thank you, Jay.